Hi and welcome to the Homeopathy Health Show. I'm Atiq Ahmad Bhatti, a fourth generation homeopath with over 20 years of professional experience in this field of healing. In the Homeopathy Health Show, I'll be talking all things homeopathy and natural, with guest interviews, tips and advice, and answering some of your questions. Homeopathy is truly a unique complementary system of healing suitable for all ages, young and old. I'd love to hear from you and welcome your questions on homeopathy and how it can or has helped you. Feel free to email me at health@liketreatslike.co.uk or visit www.liketreatslike.co.uk for more information. Whilst you're there, take a look at the Knowledge Academy and blog section, where you will find interesting information. Both sections are growing day by day, so always check back. So let's begin today's show on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio, real feel-good radio. Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of the Homeopathy Health Podcast here on UK Health Radio. Well, as always, I hope and pray you are well, and indeed I hope and pray that it continues to remain that way. So I've got another very interesting podcast for you. You'll remember that last week I had the good fortune actually to speak to Pat Ahern, aka the homeopath farmer, as far as his social media is concerned. And we spoke about a great many things, especially agri-homeopathy and how he is very successfully using homeopathy to treat his cattle. Pat himself is a dairy farmer in Cork in Ireland. And the Irish link continues, I'm delighted to say, actually. And I've got today Mary Barr. Now, Mary lives in the northwest of Ireland in beautiful Donegal, which is actually on the border of Northern Ireland. Mary qualified from the Barr School of Homeopathy in 1994, and she is a member of the Irish Society of Homeopaths since graduating and has served on the Education and Communications Committee. Now, currently, Mary coordinates the Belfast School of Homeopathy in West Belfast, which was established in 2003 by Noel Ryan, a community activist and nun during the Troubles. She recognized the potential for healing within the community. The Belfast School of Homeopathy is a charitable organization under the umbrella of the Belfast Health Initiative, which is run on a cooperative basis. So what this means really is that students and tutors are encouraged to take an active part in the atmosphere, the ethos and success of the school, which actually is really, really commendable and truly wonderful. The school also runs first aid courses for undergraduates to educate and enable people to use homeopathy at home. Now, Mary has also worked on the Get Well UK pilot scheme during 2007 and 2008 in Northern Ireland, in an attempt to integrate complementary therapies into the health system, also to make these available regardless of income. So, Mary Barr, I'm delighted to have you on the Homeopathy Health Podcast today. Thank you so much. I know you're busy, but we managed to finally hook up as such and get the date sorted. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So that was a lengthy intro, and I don't expect anyone listening to remember all of that. So we are going to go through it again with a bit more detail. I just really wanted to ask you, like I do with everyone who comes on the podcast, tell us a bit about your journey to homeopathy and what inspired you, or was it by chance? What type of encounter you had that made you think about going into this field of healing?
Okay. Well, the first time that I had homeopathy, I was a student and I had travelled in India for a year and I came back with mimic dysentery, as many people did. Had tried all sorts of conventional treatment and nothing worked. I was a student in university in Dublin, and I remember I knew nothing about homeopathy, and I don't know who introduced me to it or suggested it, but I remember sitting in a room in a flat in Rathmines, which was student land at the time, and receiving the tiny little pills from an Indian homeopath. And at this stage, I'd had amoebic dysentery for the best part of a year. I was just finishing college, and by the time I got to France, where I was heading off to Great Pick, all the symptoms had cleared completely after a year. And I never thought about it again. Being young and infallible and everything else, I never thought about homeopathy or anything else, or how I got better or anything. I just continued having a lovely time at that stage of my life. And then my son, one of my children, when he was very small, he developed croup and then whooping cough and then pneumonia recurrently. And they said he was celiac, and we had all sorts of health issues with him. And we went the conventional route because we didn't know anything else at that time. And eventually we were bringing him out of hospital one time when he had had another bout of pneumonia. And a cousin of mine rang me and said, you should bring him down to homeopath down in County Louth, which is halfway down our small country. There were 3 homeopaths in Ireland at the time. And I brought him down, and he has my permission to tell the story, and he never got sick again. He just never got sick. And a lot of other symptoms that he had at the time as well just simply disappeared. And I thought, this is really interesting. So I came over to London, and I came to Manchester, and I did interviews to join the colleges there. And it never quite clicked with me. And then a friend of mine saw on the back of the Irish Times that there was a School of Homeopathy beginning in the Burren in County Clare. And I thought, that's the place for me. So through the homeopath that I had brought my son to, knew the homeopath, Nuala Ising was starting the school. So I joined the school, and it was the journey of a lifetime, truly transformative in every way. And my introduction to homeopathy.
It's amazing, isn't it, how these journeys happen. I've had so many guests on the show and the podcast talking about how they came across homeopathy, and this by far is one of the most common experiences where the majority of people have been given homeopathy for a condition they've got, and as a result of them being cured as such, it's taken their interest, sometimes immediately, sometimes like yourself, a few years after perhaps, but it always remains. It's like when you plant the seeds for a flower, isn't it? And you water it and you see it grow and grow, and that's the journey in homeopathy as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And at the time, homeopathy was really new in Ireland. The school had just started in the Burren. We were the first year in the Burren School of Homeopathy, which was the most wonderful school because it's such a beautiful, wondrous place, the Burren in County Clare. All the teachers that Nuala would have known and all the wonderful homeopaths were just delighted to come and teach in the Burren, and it was a wonderful experience.
So when it started, how many students or did you have as such, and teachers?
I think there were 24 students.
That's not a bad number, is it?
No. I suppose it had been grown kind of organically, and this was the first occasion for people to come and study it. A lot of people knew bits about it. I knew absolutely nothing. But it worked.
And 29 years later, here we are, eh?
Yeah.
So when you did qualify and graduate from the school, what did you go straight to practice, or were you working as well somewhere else, perhaps?
I wasn't. I had a young family, and I just let my practice grow organically. I was involved in Dairy Well Woman in Northern Ireland, and I did some practice there. Because where I live, I'm about 8 miles from the border of Northern Ireland, and the little town I live in, Buncrana, it's a beautiful town, is very connected with Northern Ireland. Right. So that influence has always been there. And it is just in the whole community here, So I work with it well.
It is a beautiful place indeed. And I've been to, I've actually been to Ireland several times. There's a very good friend of mine by the name of Ronnie Turner in Dublin. I'm sure you've heard of him.
Yeah.
And he, I used to quite frequently go and visit him in Dublin. And so yeah, it's a beautiful place, and I really want the opportunity to actually travel to Ireland itself. I have friends in Galway, so I've always been. It's just how life is and how busy one can become, and it's just trying to get away. But I'm really looking forward to that, because one of the I suppose the beauty of Ireland is what makes the people so beautiful as well.
I think particularly the west coast of Ireland, there's a kind of a wildness to it that's reflected in so many things and in our language and culture, of course. Where homeopathy fits in amazingly easily.
How are you finding it then now with the people in general public and the awareness of homeopathy? Has it increased? Are people more aware of this system, irrespective of whether they use it or not?
In the last number of years that I've been practicing homeopathy, and there are a lot of homeopaths round and about here and all over the country, Ireland's very receptive to homeopathy. We're not exactly rule-keeping people. We have imagination and can see that there are other options. And I think something like homeopathy fits in very well, probably for that reason.
Absolutely. I have to say thank you to Ailsa Friel as well from the Belfast School. Listeners will remember Ailsa was on the podcast a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, I believe. And she's actually the one who introduced me to Mary. So thank you, Ailsa. Just making a point here. And thank you very much for putting me in touch with Mary. But Mary, I wanted to ask you actually, you are a member of the Irish Society of Homeopaths, but I wanted to know about the Belfast School and how that actually came about and what was involved, what help you received and how you got it working, got it off the ground as such.
I came to the Belfast School of Homeopathy a little bit later. It was started by a wonderful nun and activist, Noelle Ryan, who worked in the community, she and Father Des Wilson, who worked in Spring Hill in the middle of Ballymurphy during the height of the Troubles, during internment, during people going missing. They were really there in the community. And Noelle had a great interest in empowering people through education. And of course, health and health education was hugely in her vision. So she had studied homeopathy for some years, and she and some others in the area at the time decided to start the School of Homeopathy. I came to the school a few years later when Noelle was there, and she was like this hugely benevolent presence and overseeing person who had the wisdom and the generosity of spirit to encourage it to be a cooperative, which is an enormous thing to do. And I hope we keep the ethos of that as alive as possible, so that the students in the school are very involved in the running of the school, in the day-to-day affairs in the school, not the curriculum, naturally enough, because that is governed by the ECCH, the European Council of Homeopathy, and we're part of that, and we're part of the Irish Society of Homeopaths. But the students are very involved in the day-to-day running and decisions of the school, and also fundraising, because as you said at the beginning, the school is a charity, and it's not profit; it's non-profit. It's an amazing setup for school. Actually,
it's an interesting model. I find it fascinating that it's so nice for students, to be able to take an active part in the running of the school itself. I think that says a lot about the overall objectives, and it's not just about homeopathy, but it's about so much more, isn't it? That together we are stronger, and teamwork, and it also psychologically helps with improving social skills, doesn't it? And making friends, lifetime friends, and so much more.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it means that you have feedback all the time, and it keeps everybody, aware of what's happening, rather than something becoming, this is the way we do it.
Yeah. Wonderful. So what's the school, how is it going at the moment, and how are you involved as such?
I'm the present coordinator of the school and not the director of the school, so I coordinate in terms of the students, and we have a wonderful panel of tutors who are really, really dedicated to the school and put in an incredible amount of work and effort and enthusiasm into the school. And it just filters through to the students. We have an intake of students every second year. Northern Ireland's a relatively small province, although students come from both north and south of the country. And it's situated on the Falls Road in Belfast, which is probably infamous for during the Troubles. Really at the interface where the peace wall is, which is a very interesting thing to call something, peace wall between the communities. It was a beautiful building, which was an old linen mill, and we get to use it at the weekends when we're having our school classes or teaching classes at the weekends. It's wonderful.
And how many students do you take in on a regular basis?
Yeah, our first year students at the moment, we have 18. And the lovely thing about the school as well is it's not residential, as the Burn School was, but students and tutors bring food, so we all share together our lunch, and I feel that makes a great difference to it all. And of course, we have some wonderful cooks and bakers, so we're always blessed. There always seems to be somebody turning up.
I think of that, and I was thinking as you just said that, literally, you always see the beautiful painting of people sitting around a table, the log fires on and eating together. That's how I just pictured it for some reason. It's nice, isn't it? It's community cohesion as well. It just says a lot. I tell you, makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I remember when we were studying in the Burn, a lot of learning went on outside of classroom as well. And a lot of experiential learning and listening to other people. And the things that you didn't realize that you were taking notes on or listening attentively to.
Tell me about the courses that do you have several? I know I mentioned at the beginning actually about the first aid course, but what other courses do you have? The pre and postgraduate ones, or is there a diploma? Or
we have an undergraduate course for 4 years, as most schools have, as is under the guidelines of the ECCH, the European Council of Homeopathy. And indeed, one of our senior lecturers is actually the Irish representative on the ECCH at the moment, Michael Smith.
That's nice.
Very delighted to have, yeah. We also had the wonderful Sudhir Baldotta teaching a postgraduate course 2 years ago. We have first aid classes, which our graduates come back and teach for the school, teach it for free. And that brings people in from the community. It spreads homeopathy, the idea of homeopathy, the philosophy of homeopathy, and also it brings potential students to the school as well. Because once they see the school, it really is something very special.
You must send me some pictures.
We will. We will indeed.
And in fact, I will share those on my social media platforms as well. Let's take a look at this beauty. I think it'll be nice.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Do you still practice? So have you been practicing, and how's that going?
I do. I have a good practice here, and in North. I work between North and South. And during COVID, as with many people, I worked on Zoom. It's part of the community where I live. There are homeopaths. There are other people who teach first aid classes from time to time. So a lot of, and particularly young mothers, would be very interested in using homeopathy at home. And I think that's such an important part of the spread of homeopathy, and for people to be able to use it and to empower themselves.
A few of my guests have actually commented on this, that in fact, Marcus Fernandez from the Center for Homeopathic Education, who's the founder, mentioned that his objective is to get a homeopathic first aid kit, or a remedy kit as such, in every home. And I was talking to Pat about this, and actually Hilary Dorian as well, about the fact that by having basic homeopathic remedies at home, the benefits are not just being able to heal and being able to heal from acute ailments, but also it results in the removal of at least 80% of any fear, anxiety, or trauma associated with becoming ill. So, for example, if one's baby or child has grazed themselves or they've got a nosebleed, just reach for the homeopathic remedies and it's done, rather than frantically, oh, I have to call the GP, I have to go to the hospital, and what's happened, I don't understand this. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a very powerful system because it encompasses so many different facets, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And it takes away the dependency on, I have to do this on pharmaceuticals all the time. And
Yeah. Which is actually a plus point as well, because you're lessening the burden on doctors who can actually then go to treat, chronic or serious illnesses or emergencies, of course. And I think that's a real plus point as well there, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My feeling always is there's room for everything. And, in the medical system, there's not just one way to do it.
Absolutely. What types of conditions do you find yourself coming across more often than normal? Are there any that stick out? I know, for example, Hilary Dorian mentioned to me that she has a lot of cases of eczema and psoriasis, skin conditions generally. And I know others work very much on miasmatic influences. Some homeopaths find that the majority of patients they see are suffering from, emotional imbalances, mental health conditions. What's your sort of is there any specific one?
I'd actually say there's a kind of a balance between it all. I mean, maybe it's this part of the world where we live on the coast and it's damp, but a lot of respiratory conditions, recurrent respiratory conditions where people have been taking antibiotics and steroids continuously and just want to try something else. And of course, we know homeopathy is really successful with that. But also mental emotional conditions as well too. People would recognize that they're just through word of mouth and through recommendation more than anything else. I've tried everything else, try homeopathy, as we all did ourselves. So we said earlier on. Somebody says, well, that worked for me, and then the next thing somebody give you a call and say,
you're absolutely right. I remember when I started out, I didn't have a budget to advertise. And I remember actually once I did take an advertisement out on the radio, but I couldn't afford to pay the bill afterwards. But the host was so gracious. The station was a small station that he actually let me off. And because it was difficult, and even printing business cards was costly. But I started and it was word of mouth, like the huge amount of homeopaths will sort of agree with this. It's majority of the patients that we see are based on referrals. And I think that's a really good thing, because when you hear from somebody else you've known, or a family member, or a friend of a friend, or whatever it is, there's always that trust element. And I think that's quite important, because when people then go to see that homeopath, it's like 20 to 30%, maybe they already know him or her, because they've heard, oh, he treated me or she treated me. And that's nice as well. Again, going back to removing any anxiety for engaging with somebody about health concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And we live in a smaller community, and this part of the world communities are smaller. So yeah, that is part of it, surely. Yeah. And word just goes around.
I can tell that 20 minutes in, that your love for where you live, because you've spoken about, community, and you've spoken about how beautiful that place is. And that's nice. I envy where you're living, probably, because my road's full of cars. It's an end of terrace house, and it's noisy all day long. So what do you say? And I said to my daughters the other day, I said, they said, Dad, we love this house, we don't want to move. I said, yes, but I really want to move to the country. If, God gives us the financial ability to do that. I said, I'd just love to look out and just see trees, or just have some sort of silence, even if it's just a few hundred meters of silence. It's nice, isn't it? Because I think, and you've got that. I'm quite sure that's when you look out of your window or when you look further afield, it's full of green pastures and beauty.
It is, and the sea.
And the sea. Beautiful.
And I'm a sea swimmer all year round. That's a huge part.
Being near the sea, isn't that one of your favorite remedies?
It is indeed.
That wasn't a guess. That was just putting two and two together. It must come in. It must come in so handy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Now, Mary, you've mentioned that you worked on the Get Well UK pilot scheme. Can you share some light on what that scheme is and its objectives and what the results are and what you've achieved as such to date?
So it started in 2007 and the Prince of Wales was involved in it. And the British government had decided to do a pilot scheme. It was going to be rolled out in Wales initially to see the efficacy of complementary therapies. So there were involved homeopaths, acupuncturists, chiropractor, osteopath, and I'm making sure I'm not forgetting, aromatherapy, making sure I have everything, and massage and osteopathy involved in the scheme. So what they did was they brought it to Northern Ireland because it was the time of the peace process. So they brought it to a GP surgery in Derry and then in East Belfast. So the west side of Derry, the West Bank, and East Belfast. And in each of the two practices, what the GPs did was refer what they called heart sink patients to either an osteopath, acupuncturist, a homeopath, all of the various therapies. And for homeopathy, the brief was mostly mental emotional. But of course, people have physical symptoms that go along with that. So I was invited by Boo Armstrong, who ran the scheme from London, and she came and interviewed us here in Belfast, and I became the homeopath in Derry. So what it was, and of course there were the other practitioners as well. So the GPs in the practice, who were marginally skeptic, I'll say, but anyway, they agreed to do it. And what they did was refer patients, as they call them, heart sink patients, which are patients turning up every week, nothing happening, no amelioration of symptoms, no cure or whatever else. So that's who they actually referred to the panel of therapists. And then the University of Ulster audited and evaluated the feedback from patients and the feedback from GPs. And from those patients, and there was 713 within that year, 713 patients, 80% found that their health had improved. And homeopathy actually was the greatest improvement. People came off drugs, people experienced less pain, people returned to work, and GPs and patients themselves evaluated almost equally the evaluations were. Now, the pilot scheme, of course, there was a report came out, and the minister, Peter Hain, who was the minister at the time, had moved on, and 3 times the minister was to come to Belfast to launch the report, and it was never launched, which is such a shame. But the scheme itself, and I still would meet people when I'm in Derry, would say, gosh, that was a great thing that you were all doing at that time.
But do you find that still with what you've achieved, or what the scheme rather achieved at the time, that the results are still ongoing as such, aren't they? Because those who have integrated are continuing.
The results are ongoing, yes. And also the BBC did an hour-long documentary on Fergal Keane, actually, was the background speaker of the hour-long documentary on the scheme in Belfast and Derry.
Is there something alternative that you perhaps or your colleagues are perhaps looking at somehow to get things moving forward again?
Just in the day-to-day running of school and the practice, we do that.
Yeah.
And then for a while, in Derry, under the University of Ulster in the Northwest Regional College, a very good friend of mine who's since passed away, Helena McVeigh, brought together a course in complementary, a foundation degree actually in complementary and alternative therapies, integrative therapies, as it was
Right.
termed, trying to bring together people working in the field and also bring it to degree status as well. And that ran very well for a while.
No doubt it's raised the awareness in Ireland of homeopathy, and that's such a plus point, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really, really, really has. So much. It's like a second thought in Ireland. Will I go to the GP or will I go to a homeopath or an acupuncture or an osteopath? It's as easy as that. We also don't have the NHS, so people mostly have to pay for GP and for drugs as well.
I see. So obviously homeopathy can be another positive here, because it's not perhaps as costly as that, and there's no repeats certainly with acute conditions. The whole point of an acute condition and homeopathic treatment is that it goes, it could be one dose, it could be a couple of days, could be several days, could be weeks, but certainly with a short period of time, rather than repeating for months at a time, isn't it?
Or a lifetime.
Which is such an incredible plus point. I talk to so many people, Mary, around the world, and I'm in practice and full-time practice. I have been for 25 years, but it just always takes me aback every time I hand somebody a remedy or remedies that, it's just the power in that bottle to restore balance, emotional, mental, physical balance and well-being is just phenomenal. It really, I can't talk about it enough. And probably the listeners are thinking, oh no, here we go. He's going to say it again, but it's the power of homeopathy. It's just truly life-changing. It is life-changing.
It is, absolutely. And so many people would say that. Yeah.
People have been suffering from depression, or they're stuck in a rut, or they're at crossroads in their life, or they've got other things that we all come across, trials and tribulations, shocks, traumas, sadness, whatever it is. And for some reason, they always seem to outweigh the happy days. But maybe that's just a perception thing, possibly, because when something bad happens, it always magnifies, doesn't it? You could be ill for a month and then you'd think, oh my God, I'm ill for years. And as soon as it's gone, you've forgotten it was there even for a day.
Yeah, thankfully so.
It's purely perception. But yeah, I was saying, it's just, I've seen people and homeopaths have relayed how people who were struggling with whatever condition were able to get back to life, to their life, or to how they wanted, their life to manifest, to unfold, and they were in control again. And what's wrong with that? I mean, isn't that the best feeling in the world?
Absolutely, yeah.
Isn't it? It's honestly, I tell you, it's and I say this with 100% conviction that homeopathy, alongside perhaps other systems as well, I'm not saying it's homeopathy or the highway, but I'm saying as a homeopath, I know unequivocally that homeopathy is one of the blessings of God, because you see the same type of plants and fauna and trees and insects that are actually then used to cure you of ailments. So how close to that nature is that? I mean, it's part of nature. Literally, it's part of nature. You could go to a garden. You could look at marigold leaves. You could pluck a few. You could macerate them, so crush them up, mix them with a solution of alcohol and water, let it set, and there, lo and behold, you've got a medicinal solution there for cuts and grazes and so many other things.
Yeah,
so
the whole of the periodic table, the whole of the building blocks are there.
I mean, how incredible is that, isn't it? And when we see, I know I'm going totally off tangent, but hey, I have a habit for that. But when I see sometimes on the nature channels or the history channels, and They've gone to perhaps places in the world where communities are not that interested in technology, and they're just a close-knit community who aren't socializing too much, let's say, with other communities. But this is what they do, isn't it? They'll chop down, or they'll take rip a piece of bark off a tree, and we've seen it, and they'll take some sap from a tree, and they'll make someone to drink that because they're suffering from such and such, and that's actually true nature. That's not ancient. That's not backward. Certainly not. That's the proactive part of being grateful that God's given plants and minerals and everything else, that is on this planet that can actually heal you as well as give you delight and happiness and joy. And how amazing is that?
And that's how medicine began.
Mm.
It's the natural way of it, although we
absolutely. Wow, that's really gone off tangent here, hasn't it? But that was it needed to be done, needed to be said. Now I have some light-hearted questions for you before we go back to another serious topic. But what is your favorite remedy or remedies in homeopathy that you find you refer to quite more often than not?
I would probably have to say Natrum muriaticum. And I don't have favorites as such. And I was talking to a great friend and colleague of mine recently, and she said it, and we agreed it made the biggest change to people. People who are in grief and stuck in grief, and Natrum muriaticum just lifts that heaviness and sadness and depression that comes from grief. And I mean grief in the biggest sense of that word. I don't mean just loss of death, but through death, I mean loss generally. I think Natrum muriaticum. And it was the very first remedy I had, and I have that affinity with the sea. So there you go. That probably has to do with all of that as well.
In the grand scheme of things, Mary, if you had some table salt and you said to somebody, okay, they'd put it on their fish and chips, and then you said, you know what? This can actually heal you from such and such. It sounds unbelievable, doesn't it?
And simple.
And simple, yeah. And that's actually you've hit the nail on the head. It's the simplicity, isn't it?
It is.
And we're always taught, I've certainly been taught to keep things simple. My uncle, who was a world-famous homeopath in Nairobi in Kenya, spent a great deal of time with him and learning from him, of course, and seeing him in practice. And he always used to give me this advice. He used to say, just keep your head down and do the best that you can. Don't just ground yourself. Don't think you're anything. And I honestly, that advice I've never forgotten, ever. Because it's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with you. It's not the skill we have. But what it is to do with is the compassion that we have to heal somebody, to help somebody.
And it has to be the most interesting job in the world.
Yeah. Now, the next offbeat question is your favorite book or books?
I'm going to say The Magus was probably the book that impressed me greatly at the time.
Okay.
And that's a long time ago. I just loved it. But I read an awful lot. I love the way it takes you away and just into other people's words, which is probably what homeopathy is about, or appreciating and other people's words. Yeah.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
There's so much suffering, though, isn't there, Mary? When you meet patients, and of course, it does get, sometimes it does get you down, doesn't it? Because, well, look, if you don't get down, that means there's something wrong. Because compassion means, one's heart is soft, and you're committed. But it's just sad to see, isn't it? Though I'm not talking homeopathy here. I'm just talking generally that so many people are suffering, and they've got so many problems, and a large majority of them keep those problems inside. They keep them bottled up. They don't express themselves, and that's sad as well, isn't it?
I agree with you. And the other side of it, I find homeopathy because, when you're listening to somebody, and each one of us has times in our lives that are very, very difficult. I think when we know that it's something we share rather than they or us, we all have that common stuckness that happens in our lives every now and then, and in different parts of our lives. But as a homeopath, you're also thinking, you're listening to it, but you're also thinking, okay, there's a remedy at the end of this, and it's going to make such a change. There's something really positive to be and solution focused, as I would say in counselling. Do you know that it's not stuck, that you're working towards finding a solution, finding a change to it, so that people don't have to stay stuck. Because I remember the first time, actually, Janet Snowden taught us, wonderful, wonderful homeopath and Bath, taught us in the Burn one time. And I remember her taking a case, and it's the first time I'd ever seen a live case being taken. And I remember sitting there thinking, and somebody was talking with them saying, people in Donegal don't talk like that. Because I didn't know how to talk about feelings, about expressing yourself like that. Do you know what I mean? And very often people in my practice would say, I've never said that before. I've never said that out loud. I didn't even know I thought it. Because you're allowing the space for somebody to go inside themselves and just hear themselves saying what they need to say for themselves as much as for us as homeopaths.
Mary, when we talk to patients, of course, a large 50% of the treatment is the case taking or the therapy or the talking, the counselling. But it's so true that and people I know are very talking doesn't help, but you can see the change in people who you've given time to express their health concerns, and where you've been able to guide them in a certain direction. You can see the weight lift off their shoulder, because when they come in to when they go out, they're a totally different person.
Yeah.
So talking is powerful, everybody has a story to tell. You just have to listen, right?
Absolutely. And that's the big thing, is listening.
I have, I once came across somebody who said, my phone always rings and, it's patients keep calling. My reply was, how lucky you are that somebody's calling you, asking you for help. I mean, what more could you ask in life, that somebody is calling you? Who are you? Who are we? And they're actually phoning you up and hoping you can help them. I said, when you pick up the phone, just be grateful that the phone is ringing and you can actually help somebody.
And we have this set of skills and philosophy and whole battery of homeopathic medicines to help that.
When you said we have this set of skills, this is how I think. I just immediately thought of Liam Neeson when he Taken, when he says, I have this set of skills. I don't know if you've seen that film. Have you?
Oh, Taken, gosh.
There's a very famous line where somebody calls him up and this is what he says, I have a particular set of skills.
Right.
Anyway, I have to ground myself again. I'm going somewhere else. So what's on the horizon, Mary? What are you working on, and what are you looking forward to?
At the moment, the school is moving along very, very well. I've only been working in the school for the last, this is the fourth year, and I'm delighted with that. And it's a great team of people to work along with, and it's important in my scheme of life. That it's spreading homeopathy, and the school is doing very well, and its reputation is doing very well. And when the time comes, I'll pass it on to somebody else quite happily. Swim in the sea more, travel more.
Yes, yes, of course.
Whatever else comes the way.
Do you travel present? Do you go places? And
I do love to travel. I've always been a traveler.
Favorite country or place?
Probably in the last few years, Cuba.
Oh, interesting. I didn't expect you to say that. Okay. How's that? What is it like? Is homeopathy well known in Cuba?
It is indeed.
Amazing.
Very well. Yeah. And a lot of alternative medicines, and a lot of because of the blockade, and they don't receive drugs from from America and all, of course, anyway. Homeopathy is big in it. They've used it hugely for epidemics and have done tremendous research on dengue flu.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Any books on the horizon?
You're not the first person who said that to me. Maybe I write a little bit of poetry, and when I have more time, when my life quietens down a little bit, it's something I would love to spend more time at. I love.
Not enough homeopaths write about. Everyone writes about remedies, but not enough write about their life journey, and I think it's really, really important. In the meantime, we've got this podcast. The objective is very much to get homeopaths on board, so people who are interested in homeopathy, who just want to know a bit more, they get that tangible feel. They get to know Mary, they get to know about the Belfast School, they get to know what's involved and what the person sounds like. And I think that makes a very, very big difference overall. And it's a very strong form of education as well, I think, and knowledge.
It's a wonderful thing you do. I've been listening to some of your podcasts.
Oh, that's very kind of you. So, Mary, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the Homeopathy podcast. Learned a great deal. It's really been fascinating. I love your journey to homeopathy. I commend you on the work that you're doing with the Belfast School of Homeopathy itself and some of the other initiatives that you've worked on. And I wish you well and success. And like I say to everybody, and I do mean it, I do hope that by the end of this year, sometime later this year, let's say, you will come back and we can talk about homeopathy some more.
It would be lovely. And thank you so much. I really enjoyed the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you. And I will speak to you very, very soon. I do hope you've enjoyed the Homeopathy Health Show here on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. Tune in next time for more things homeopathy, interviews and segments on the healing possibilities that homeopathy can bring you. And don't forget to visit UK Health Radio online at www.ukhealthradio.com to see the many other amazing shows available to listen live and on demand. Or why not download the app from the iOS and Android stores. Until next time, stay safe and take care.